Hi, welcome to Monday Morning with Tanny. Today is September 14th, 2020. Thank you so much for your patience. I thought I was getting started and I adjusted my monitor and I turned off my computer, so I'm 7 minutes late. I am thankful that you waited. It actually brought to mind something before I continue on with who I am that is really important for us to think about when we're working with people and interacting with people who are grieving and mourning. And that is time. Time is so different when your world has been disrupted and uprooted and shattered. Things can seem to take so long. When you're waiting, it can seem like an eternity if somebody is a couple minutes late. So I completely understand that this might have been hard for you to wait. Or things might just move really fast and they can't believe that this event or this moment has arrived, and people are like, well, Christmas comes at the same time every year. But it's not the same for people who have experienced a big loss. Nothing is the same. So I ask that you are patient with yourself, with your confusion with time. I am asking that you be patient with other people when they are experiencing grief and loss with time. And if you are late and you apologize, realize that apology isn't always going to land like you hope it does, just because it is very difficult and there's a lot of emotions involved. On that note, if you haven't seen my videos before, I am Tanny Reed Walker. I do this Facebook Live on Monday mornings, and I intend to do them until January, so we'll see how this works out. I work for FCSS in the Barons-Rica-Warner area, so that's Family and Community Support Services. You can contact us at www.fcss.ca, and we have a wide variety of supports for all ages and stages of life, and all throughout southern Alberta in the Barons-Rica-Warner area. We also have a YouTube channel, so you can access our YouTube videos. These videos actually end up going on YouTube, and you can share with your friends and family anywhere in the world. We just really want to be supportive using these platforms, especially during this time of disconnection and disruption in our world. Monday Morning is a place where we talk about grief and loss. I have done a focus of loss through death. They're currently just finishing up a series of the 12 dimensions of childhood grief. And just so you know, next week I'm going to start one on survivors of suicide. I feel like that is a really good topic right now to talk about, especially since September is Suicide Prevention Month. And I know there's a lot of things going on that might bring up some feelings around a loss from suicide that you might have. I was just checking to see about messages because my messages are not working on the Facebook Live. I haven't figured that out yet. So, yeah, I really want to take some time to support people that have lost a loved one through suicide. And I think it's a topic that we don't talk about quite enough. So today we're going to continue on with the 12 dimensions of grief. This is Dr. Alan Wolfelt's book. It's Companioning the Grieving Child, a Soulful Guide for Caregivers. I just adore Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He takes the pressure of trying to fix grief and just enlightens that it's part of our humanity and it's part of our connection, and it's actually part of it's love. It's love that has just been transformed, and it hurts. So the 12 dimensions, I'll give you a quick recap of the videos that happened before this. The one is shock and apparent lack of feelings. 2 is physiological changes. 3 is regression. 4 is disorganization and panic. 5 is explosive emotions. 6 is acting out. 7 is hyper maturity. 8 is fear. 9 is guilt. And today we'll be talking about 10, which is relief, 11, which is sadness, and 12, which is reconciliation. And I know that we have often, we've learned, the little we've learned about grief, even I myself when I first started out, was the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's I can't even remember how many there are now, but she has stages of grief, and there are no stages. She wrote that for people who were dying, not were already passed away, and she wrote it as a framework for people to understand different things that happen during grief and mourning. And as I talk, all of these things, we're human beings. How we communicate is we need to kind of put things into steps, but these are not steps. This is a web, and they're like lines go to all of the different sections. You can, even in one day, you can feel all of the things. So it's not linear. You can't prescribe how long each feeling is going to happen, like when you're going to go into that section. This is all just awareness so that people can understand just how big grief is, and to help us have compassion for ourselves, and in this series for our children. So let's talk about dimension number 10, which is relief. This one might feel a little uncomfortable. Some people, oh, Charisma, thank you. I see you talking to me today. It's a cute little rainbow, and it just feels like hope to me. So I'm happy to see you here. Anybody else that wants to comment, please do. Relief. So relief is an appropriate response when someone dies. And there's several reasons why a person might feel relief. And the first one is if there's been a long illness and there has been suffering, especially for a child, it can be relieving that that person has passed away. And part of that is because children are quite egocentric, which is a normal developmental thing. I also know adults, we'll talk about that, but we're talking about children today. So after a long illness, or some other things, like if there's been abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, or if there's been substance dependence, and it's just been very complicated and very painful, and you know that that person has been suffering, or that child has been suffering, it can be a relief that that person is gone. When it's the attention has been turned towards an ill person or someone who is just dealing with a substance dependence, children want attention. They need attention. They crave attention. They learn through that attention and that give and take. And because they're so egocentric, when a loved one dies, it can be relieving that some of that attention can come back to them. And it doesn't make them selfish or greedy, and it doesn't mean that they didn't love the person. It just means that life can start to focus back on them a little bit. And it's just relieving. And so part of this can be make children feel guilty, and then the guilt can weigh upon their self-esteem, and they can start to feel depressed. So if a child expresses that they feel relief that that person dies, it's not unnatural. It doesn't mean it's the only feeling they have. It doesn't mean they didn't love the person. It doesn't mean they're selfish little creeps. It means that they are human. It means that they are in a appropriate developmental phase, and that the attention coming to them is helpful for them. So another thing that can happen is, so in some families, like really closed systems where people try to protect the children, children might not know about ongoing illness, whereas the adults do. And so the adults, like when there's an illness, like the grief and mourning doesn't start when that person dies, it starts well before when they're ill. And so in a closed system, the adults that know about what's happening, they have time to prepare, and their grief is going to look different. But a child that doesn't know about that, they just have this sudden, unexpected slam of grief that happens to them. And so for them, it's an unexpected and sudden death. And so they're going to experience that quite a bit differently than if the family's an open system and everyone is aware of the transitions that happen. So there's anticipatory mourning. For example, it could sound like this. Oh, I should put the book up for a bit. There's a section I want to read directly out of there. But anyway, it can sound like this. Oh, he's sick. And then, oh, he's very sick. And then, oh, he might die. And then he's going to die. Oh, he's suffering so much. Oh, I'll be glad when he's out of pain. And then it becomes, he's dead. So as this transition happens, children get to mourn each of those stages. And they're anticipating that death. If they don't get to experience that, it'll be a sudden death. So children that get to anticipate the death will often feel relief because they know that their loved one was hurting and their loved one was suffering. And it's a very different experience. I'm not saying that it's a better experience. I'm just saying it's very different. And relief, and I also mentioned that a child will feel relief if they were physically, emotionally, or sexually abused by that person. But it doesn't mean they didn't love them. It doesn't mean they weren't important to them. It just means that they might feel some relief that that stuff isn't going to happen anymore. So it can be very complicated. How do we help? How do we help children that are experiencing relief? Well, the first thing and the most important thing is to remember it's a normal response. Listen to them without shame or guilt. It can be very shocking sometimes to hear that somebody is relieved that a person died. I know that I have experienced that. And I could see there is some judgment, and it's a very, very, very difficult thing to talk about. So I'm really hoping that we can change that and understand that just because you feel relief doesn't mean you don't feel all of the other things or some of the other things at different times. So that is the most important. And I think that's probably the most important with all of the dimensions. These responses are normal and human. And always remember, they aren't linear. It does, I think I've mentioned this, it doesn't mean it's a lack of love. So remember that there is love there. And we cannot prescribe relief. We can't be like, oh, yes, that person is, oh, it's so much better that they have died. We can't tell children how they're feeling. We listen to them. We listen to them over and over and over again with all of the feelings. And if it's going to come, it will come naturally. One of our favorite shows that we watch every Christmas is Love Actually. And in Love Actually, one of the little lads, his mom dies. And after she died, he locks himself in his room and he's just miserable. And his stepdad is very concerned about this child because he just lost his mom from a long illness. And you can tell by the funeral that there was lots of anticipatory mourning going on. The mom really worked at facilitating that, as did the stepdad. But this child was very locked in his room. And when the stepdad finally got it out of him, he found out that it wasn't his mom being gone. He's like, I know I should be sad and upset that my mom's gone, and I am, but he was in love. And it was like, oh, this child isn't shredded by their mom gone. It's changed his world. But because of that anticipatory mourning that was going on, he had enough relief and things, and gone through so much of that he was able to do some reconciliation sooner than his stepdad had thought he would. And we'll talk about reconciliation in a little bit here. So just continue to be understanding that we are human and we are complicated, and we have all these amazing feelings to access, and we just need to learn how to talk about them. All right, dimension 11, sadness. That's the hole in your heart, and children will feel that hole in their heart. This is most often difficult for children. It's also very difficult for adults, but we're talking about children. And on the other hand, it's also kind of easy for adults to understand. It's like, we've seen the movies. We know we're supposed to be sad for a limited time only, but we're supposed to be sad. Just going to slip in there. Brand new grief can last like 2 years or more. So be patient with that timeline. We talked about timeline at the beginning of this video a little bit too. Back to sadness. Feelings of loss can take some time to sink in as we feel shock. We have lots of magical thinking in children. They think that they will magically be able to bring up their loved one again. They're just going to reappear. If their loved one lives far away, it might take some time. I know even as an adult, I had a loved one in a different province pass away, and it was a shock to me every 6 months or so when I'd go visit and they weren't there, and everyone else was like acting normally, and I was like, what? So it's different. And then I have an adult brain, so little ones, it can take even longer. So children that are feeling sad may express a distinct lack of interest in themselves and others. There may be changes in appetite and sleep. There can be a prolonged withdrawal. So that would be explained why in Love Actually, the child being gone in his room for a long time was like, oh, worried and concerned about him being withdrawn, but it was for a different reason. That's why it's always really good to talk to kids and just be open. We have an idea of what we think is going on for them, but they're the experts in their own lives, and they have their own ideas and thoughts and lives. So anyway, they can experience prolonged withdrawal. Their personality may seem dampened or different. I have a lot of parents that contact me and want to know why they just want their children back to the way they were. And so I have the honor of being able to companion them through their grief and their loss and their mourning, and ease parents in their concern that their child is going to be forever damaged. And it's not a damaging thing. It's part of our world. They may express nervousness. They may have an inability to experience pleasure. I believe the technical term for that is anhedonia. Anyway, they can't. They're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel happy. I don't enjoy all of the things I used to love. Everything's gray. Children are so descriptive. And that's sadness. And you can talk about sadness. And they might have low self-esteem, depending on so many things. But talking about their feelings can really help increase that self-esteem, increase that normalcy of what they're going through and how big it is. And it's not that they're damaged. A bereaved child can often become quite attached to somebody who might remind them of the person that has passed away. And that can feel like a bit of a relief for some adults, because they feel like that child is, connecting and kind of growing. And it's nice for them to be able to connect, but still have other people and other ways of having them express those feelings. Which leads me into, how do you companion with sadness? Encourage the child to talk about their intense feelings of sadness. Or play. They can play. Find their favorite characters. Go on adventures. Whatever they do for playing. Help them play through those themes and the sadness. If they're talking, be creative. If they're talking about how their world is gray, have them draw pictures and use black and white and gray and how they feel and what happens. And you can ask them, is there anywhere that there's light? Charisma posted a little rainbow, so there might be a tiny rainbow. Who knows what it's going to look like, but help them be creative. They can build things out in nature. They can go for walks. Music is really empowering, especially for the older kids. Oh, sometimes they find the most incredible songs, and there's so much out there. And with YouTube and I don't know what those things they use, they can find songs that match them to a T. I have been blown away and brought to tears so many times by some of the most beautiful and emotional and sometimes ugly even music, just expressing how they're feeling. And it's super amazing. And teach kids about grief bursts. So how I explain a grief burst is, have you ever looked at somebody you love and maybe your kid's sleeping, or you're looking at your partner across the room and they're doing something just normal and mundane, but you feel that massive feeling of love inside your heart, and you're just you're gonna burst with it. You're so consumed by that love in that moment. Grief bursts are the same, but it's so big how much they miss that person, and how it's an intense emotion, and it can come up over so many ways. So many things can trigger it. A song, a smell. There's certain times of day where everything is just right, and suddenly I'll just remember that person. The memories will flood in. A certain type of light, the environment, sometimes it just randomly happens. And letting children know that is to be expected. It's not going to be that intense for very long, and it's a way that your brain and your heart help you remember sometimes. And it's kind of like you're just building your new world. It's life-changing to know that these things are normal, and you're not going crazy, and you're not going to lose control. It's a huge burst of feeling. Excuse me. Okay. Dimension 12, reconciliation. So I just am going to remind you again, all of this is not an event. It's a process, and that includes reconciliation. Everything takes time, and it's complicated, and it's messy. Oh, I don't know if you've seen the new art that's out, but it's paint splashed in together, and I don't know how they do it, but there's lots of that out right now, and it kind of reminds me of grief. It's all just splattered on the canvas and poured, and there's bubbles and shapes, and it goes wherever it wants. And that's kind of like grief. It's all of the things. And at the end, there's this beautiful picture, and it's an experience. And I've never seen one that's wrong. They're all right. They're all individual. Every one of them is different. And that is how grief is, and that is how mourning is. It is messy and individual and beautiful and painful and all of the things together. Reconciliation is not getting over it. Oof, can't stand that one. It is not going back to normal. I've talked before in videos about going backwards before you go forwards. And by going backwards, we talk about remembering the person and remembering the feelings and remembering before you can go forward and understand the future. So it's not going, you can't go back to normal. There's no normal to go back to. You're moving forward into the future. And reconciliation is integrating your new reality of your life moving forward without that person physically in your world. Their presence will no longer be with you. And it's not an event. It's not a lightning bolt that hits you and goes, oh yeah, I'm good now. You will always grieve and mourn the loss of this person. Reconciliation is how you integrate that into your world. I always talk about it like it's a tapestry, like a woven tapestry or a rug. And you added another color. And that color is going to be used throughout the entire rest of the rug. And that's what happens with reconciliation. So there's a new energy that comes with reconciliation, a new confidence, ability to fully acknowledge the reality of the death and be engaged with the living. That's a huge statement. Can you see how that would take time? Yeah, it would take time to work that into your world. Children will start to establish eating and sleeping patterns that are more stable. Like I said, they'll have a new sense of energy and well-being. I've seen it. It's like emerging from that fog of grayness, and suddenly I see creativity burst. And it's like a flower opening. And it's still there. You need that dimension. It's never going to go away. But it's changed, and the person has changed. There's an increase of thinking and judgment-making capacity. So making decisions is easier. You gotta remember, you are working with children, so they do have developmental levels, and they do have lots of brain growing, but you'll start to see that they're changing. The Ice Age is over. Yeah, that's a good... I think you're not the only person that I've heard of that has that song go through their head when they feel that shift. Thank you for sharing that, Charisma. You start to enjoy life experiences again. Find yourself laughing a little bit more. Not that people don't laugh during early grief. We do. We're human. But being a little bit more brave and going out and doing things again changes. And a really firm recognition of the finality and reality of the death really is there. It's an understanding. There's fewer dreams about that person randomly showing up. Less magical thinking that if the child does certain things that person might come back. It just becomes more realistic. And children are able to develop new and healthy relationships. So that's a huge sign. Just because they've been withdrawn, their brains have been changing, they're not even sure who they are, what their role is, or any of those things. So there's an ability to start to create new healthy relationships. And again, it's not an event. It takes time. Our brains and our lives are very complicated, and children are extra complicated because they are going through developmental stages. So they can experience these things for a very long time. The role is understand, again, that this is not linear. It takes time. Grief experience varies from different person to different person. I often say it's like a thumbprint. We all have a thumbprint. It's all different. There's lots of similarities. There's like swirls and all kinds of things there, but nobody's is exactly the same. And realize that being there with somebody while they're in this experience is a privilege. And eventually realizing that we've loved so much and still love so much that going through this is something of a privilege. If you've never loved, you won't experience this. And it's an integral part of life. It's so important. People will always die. And it's part of our existence. And some say it makes it sweeter. Personally, I think it'd be great to live forever. That's just me. But I do know that going through this, it changes us. And it's a common human experience. It connects us all. I have a little bit more. I've gone over, but then, I was late. So I'm just going to share some signs of complicated mourning. So, complicated mourning signs are a total denial of the reality of death, persistent panic, fear, prolonged physical complaints without organic findings. So if they're sick all the time and you can't find a reason, like physically. Prolonged feelings of guilt or responsibility for the death when the child obviously is not responsible. If they are feeling guilty because they are responsible for the death, it would be very important for them to have some individual counseling. Chronic patterns of apathy or depression. So if it's going on and on and on and on, absolutely get them some help. Chronic hostility, acting out towards themselves or others. So if they're causing harm to themselves or if they're causing harm to others. Prolonged changes of typical behavior patterns. So if a fairly friendly, easygoing child now gets into fights all the time, or the normally outgoing child becomes extremely introverted or withdrawn, you might want to actually get some assistance for them. Dramatic or ongoing sleeping or eating patterns, drug or alcohol abuse, and suicidal thoughts or actions. Those are all very important things to be aware of. Thank you again. How long is prolonged? I think that I would be concerned if it's been a few weeks, and especially if you've noticed that they're not experiencing other emotions and feelings going on with that. And if they're talking about things like, I think a combination would be really important, and prolonged would be also depending on your child. So if you have an extra sensitive child, they might take longer to move through those feelings than one that tends to be just generally a more happy, outgoing, like easygoing person. So if you are concerned, just make an appointment with somebody, have some chats with some people that are professionals and understand this, and they can assist you in understanding if this is an extra concern where they might need to see a doctor or have some individual or group counseling. Thanks for that question. That was nice. So, once again, I'm always going to probably finish off. I don't know, I should check back, but take care of yourself. Self-care is so important when you've had a loss, when the child you're supporting has had a loss. It is so, so important. Be kind. Don't shame or guilt yourself or the child. Understand a variety of emotions is so important and so needed. And thank you so much for paying attention to the series. Please share, please like, please comment, please send me messages. I really love doing these, and it would be really awesome to know if other people are finding value in them. Also, as I mentioned, next week I'm going to start a series on companioning the suicide survivor. Again, I'll be using a lot of Dr. Alan Wolfelt's work. I think I have a book for him on that one too. I was looking up at my bookshelf if you're wondering why my face went up there. So this is the one that I've been following. There's a lot more information in here. I might get back to this again later on. But for now, just as it's suicide prevention month, then I thought it would be really appropriate to have a series on suicide survivors. So until next week, thank you so much, and please take care of yourself. You are very, very important.